climate action. Would you be able to tell us a bit more about who you are and what your background is?
Yeah, so I'm a retired university professor of architecture. And I live in Northern Ireland because I came here to work at Queen's University Belfast. So I've been here for about 35 years.
Mm-hmm.
I'm originally from Manchester, and my specialism is building materials and sustainability.
Amazing. And what have been your areas of research within that kind of specialism, or what have you been focused on?
Well, we started out producing something called the Green Building Digest, and that was an analysis of the way buildings were built and what sort of impact they had on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very valuable publication. It's still in print, amazingly. But I started to realize it was very negative in the sense that it was more about things that were wrong with building materials.
Yeah.
So we started looking around for alternative ways that we could build buildings being more ecological.
Mm-hmm.
So we started out with looking at things like straw bale construction.
Yeah.
And we did some work on that. And then we started to find there were lots of other ecological materials, but eventually got into hemp and hempcrete, and that's what we mainly work on now.
Amazing. And what is Hempcrete?
So we get the what's called the hemp shiv, which is the straw from processing hemp. So when you grow hemp on a farm and you harvest it, you end up with a fiber product, which is very valuable. It gets used for all sorts of things. Used to make clothes. It can be used in biocomposites. They use it to replace plastics, for instance. Now.
Oh, yeah.
So a lot of the more expensive German cars, the interiors are made out of hemp now, not out of plastic. And even Airbus are using it in aeroplane manufacture now. So it's a very valuable material. You get also hemp is a food crop, so grow it for oil from the seed, and you can extract CBD, which has medicinal properties. So, and then when you've done all that, left over, you've got all the woody core of the plant, which is known as the hurd or the shiv. And if you chop that up and mix it with a lime binder, you can turn that into a very lightweight concrete material, which is perfect for building.
Amazing. And do you grow hemp yourself, or do you buy the shiv from someone else who's already processed it?
Yeah, we don't grow it here, but there are people growing hemp in Northern Ireland, and I talk to them on a regular basis. And there are a lot of people growing hemp in Ireland. We have an organisation called the Irish Hemp Cooperative, which has 200 members or more now. It's growing very rapidly, and I think there were 70 farmers got licenses to grow hemp last year, all over Ireland, including Northern Ireland. But actually, there's no processing facilities for hemp in Ireland, which is holding back the development of the industry. So the hemp that we use for building comes from Yorkshire, England, and we've been working with a company there for the last 10 years, and they grow hemp, they process it for mattresses. They produce mattresses which are made out of natural materials, wool and hemp, and so they have lots of leftover straw as well.
Amazing.
So they sell that to us, and we've actually exported hemp all over the world for Hempcrete projects.
So Hempcrete as a building product, is it as strong as the alternatives are on the market, maybe concrete?
So in order to reduce carbon emissions in construction, we should really be building buildings out of timber, not out of concrete. Cement and concrete has one of the biggest polluting factors in the world, really. There are various figures, but the production of cement is said to be 15 to 20% of all carbon emissions. So we should minimize the use of concrete. Don't necessarily get rid of it altogether, but it should be used in very tiny amounts. But if you look at the standard building construction on land, it's all made out of cement and concrete. So it not only is it bad for the environment, but it also doesn't insulate buildings. It doesn't create a very good environment to live in. So we should be moving to timber construction. Timber is a valuable resource as well, so you have to use timber as sparingly as possible. So then what you have to do is insulate the building. So when they build conventional timber frame construction buildings here, they very often use concrete blocks as well, or they wrap it all in plastic, and then they use petrochemical insulation materials to insulate the buildings.
Yeah.
So the carbon footprint of those, the standard construction of a house emits about 100 to 150 kilograms of carbon dioxide per cubic meter of a building.
Wow.
So if you think per cubic meter of a building, you're talking about 100, 200 cubic meters. So that's a massive amount of carbon emissions just from constructing one house.
Yeah.
If you build a house from what we call bio-based materials, natural materials, then you're actually it's a negative figure. So it's about the same amount of carbon emissions that you're saving by doing that. So we should be moving towards bio-based
definitely
construction.
And in terms of bio-based construction, you mentioned there about insulation. Are there any natural-based insulation products that you could have?
Well, the advantage of Hempcrete is that it is a walling system and insulation at the same time.
Ah, perfect.
So it's you would normally build with a timber frame. So you put up the timber frame and then you encase it in Hempcrete. And Hempcrete is all that you need. So that goes right through the wall. And that provides you with the structural strength of the building to stop it moving from side to side. And it also gives you weather protection, but it's also insulation as well. So it's a remarkable material because it does lots more than conventional materials do.
Yeah, definitely. And you mentioned there about the difference in carbon footprint of this, but in what ways, other than that, is Hempcrete synonymous with climate action or our approach to climate change?
Well, I mean, the main thing is that we have to, everyone's talking about decarbonisation and zero carbon and so on. So what we have to do is reduce the amount of heat that's needed in buildings. So if if we want to save energy and stop people using fossil fuels, then we have to make buildings much better insulated.
Yes.
Now, most conventional buildings actually don't work that well, so people are still having to spend a lot on heating. But we can build buildings with Hempcrete that have absolutely minimal need for heating at all. But the other thing, which is a big advantage, is that it's also healthy. So it's what's called hygroscopic, so it absorbs moisture in the atmosphere. And that means you maintain the relative humidity in the building at about 50%, which is the perfect level that it should be at. So that stops mold growth and it helps. So people who've got asthma and respiratory problems do not have them in a Hempcrete building. And we have plenty of evidence of that. So people, we've even had people stay in our hemp cottage who said it's the first time they've had a proper night's sleep for years because
incredible.
Because it's helped to reduce the. So that it's a lot of people, particularly people in fuel poverty in Northern Ireland, have got damp and mold in their houses. Well, in theory, you shouldn't get damp and mold in a Hempcrete building because it actually stops that happening.
That's incredible.
The materials that are currently used to insulate buildings are getting very bad press at the moment since the Grenfell fire, because people have begun to realise that these materials are toxic and flammable, and there are big campaigns to try and reduce them, and even to stop certain rugby clubs being sponsored by companies that produce these materials. So I won't mention the name in particular, but these materials have become, people started to realize how bad they are. So take an example of polyurethane insulation that's made with a chemical called isocyanates. So isocyanates are very toxic and very bad for the environment. And the production of isocyanates was pretty well stopped in Europe because of pollution concerns. The biggest factory was near Tarragona in Spain, and it was polluting the river Ebro, which is a major river flowing into the Mediterranean. So they've stopped the production there. And for a while, some of the big insulation companies had to admit that they couldn't supply materials. However, they've shifted the production to China, surprise, surprise. And so this toxic materials now. And one of the things they discovered in China is that there were big CFC emissions. CFCs are chlorofluorocarbons, which are used in coolants and so on. They're used as blowing agents. They were banned in 1992, but they're still being used in China to produce these materials, which are then put into cans, put on a ship, shipped over here to Ireland, and then get turned into insulation materials here. So these things are really, really bad.
Yeah.
When they go on fire, even though they use highly toxic flame retardants, they give off toxic gases like cyanide and so on, which kill people within seconds if there's a fire. So we have to find alternatives to that. Now, if you use something like hempcrete, there is some manufacturing of that, producing the lime binder which goes into it. So that needs to be burned, and so there is some emissions from that, but it's a much more natural material. And lime is a natural biocide, so it actually it stops getting mold and problems like that.
Yeah.
But also it's completely fireproof. So we've tried to set fire to hempcrete, and it actually can't do it. It's being put in standard fire tests. So it's incredibly safe. And that's what makes a huge difference. So we need to get bigger uptake of these sort of materials.
Absolutely, that's phenomenal with the fire safety of it. And are there any pitfalls with it?
Well, the construction industry has tried to move to what they call modern methods of construction, which is trying to produce materials which are essentially it's dry construction method, and things can be prefabricated and taken to site. And that's meant to be better for building workers and so on, which in theory it is. But in practice, what you end up is you've got all these big panels which have to be stuck together in some way. So they use lots of toxic foam to fill up the gaps, and then they wrap it all in plastic to try and make it airtight. So it's not that great. But hempcrete is a wet on-site production. Now, we can make prefabricated panels out of hempcrete. There's a few examples of that. But the best way to use it is actually to mix it on site. And so construction doesn't like that. It feels like it's going backwards.
Oh, okay.
So you're using this sort of old-fashioned wet method. So that means that it's not so popular. And obviously it takes a few weeks to dry out as well.
Yeah.
So that's a disadvantage. But also there is this huge prejudice in the construction industry against natural materials. They think natural materials are going to rot and won't be any good. And it's so much better to have everything made out of plastic,
Yeah.
Well, I mean, now we're trying to be plastic free. But the construction industry is going in the opposite direction.
Yeah.
I got an inquiry from a leading scientist at a university in London the other day about microplastics, and they realised that there's been a massive increase in the use of microplastics in building construction. And one example would be PFAs. Don't ask me to say what PFAs are. I'm very bad at remembering the chemical names of these things. But if you think of the non-stick coating on pans,
or the sort of defoul thing, CH08 or something.
Yes, so they're made from PFAs. DuPont, there's a film about that. So we realised in the last year or two that actually one of the biggest uses of PFAs is in construction materials. And they're in everything, absolutely unbelievable. Even though I thought I was an expert on this, I had no idea just how widespread the use of PFAs were. So there you've got a toxic microplastic chemical, which is getting out into the environment through its use in buildings.
Yeah. And the time it takes to use, you were saying there's a wait time or maybe a few weeks of drying out. It seems like such a small price to pay for the benefits of it and the benefits just in terms of the life of that building, for it to be fire retardant and better for health and not contain these quite harmful chemical materials.
Well, see, I'm involved in a trade union initiative about green jobs, because
Yeah.
one of the things which has been realised is that if we're going to start banning all these environmentally bad things,
Yeah.
we've got to find alternatives that will create employment for people. So, for me, if Hempcrete is a bit more labour intensive, that's not a bad thing. But
Yeah.
it's very difficult because there is a big lobby in those sort of Green New Deal type groups to continue to promote the use of plastic, toxic, flammable materials. And what the expression they use is shovel-ready technology. So what they say to me, oh, we can't wait for you to produce all these funny natural materials. We've got to use what's currently available, and that's what we need to insulate buildings, and that's what's going to create the jobs. So I'm involved on a weekly basis on this, with arguing with people about that kind of issue, and it's a very fundamental divide. And there are lots of organisations out there, like the New Economics Foundation and others, that I have terrible arguments with, because that's what they do. They're continuing to promote the interests of the big petrochemical companies, even though they think they're not.
Yeah.
Because they're advocating green solutions.
And that is just crazy to say, like, oh, well, we can only use things that are shovel ready now, but that's only driving demand for that product to continue to be produced rather than, it seems like such a,
well, the interesting thing you see is that even the mainstream industry, as the penny's starting to drop about this now. So I had a very good conversation with a leading insulation distributor. I won't mention their name because it was a private conversation, but one of the biggest distributors of insulation. They realise that they've got to move on to bio-based materials. So they're now sniffing around trying to work out what materials they could use. The thing we're going for is wood fibre insulation. So wood fibre is made from wood waste. So it's a really good product. It sort of ticks all the circular economy boxes. I don't think it is as good an insulation as Hempcrete, but it's still a good material. But it's not manufactured in the UK. If you're going to use it, it's got to be imported from France or Germany or wherever. Because the industry here have blocked its production. So there was a big factory in Coleraine called Spanboard, and Spanboard were processing wood waste and making chipboard. Chipboard's a pretty rubbish product, to be quite honest, but it's kind of useful stuff. And they got taken over by a big company from somewhere else in Europe, Portugal or somewhere, and they basically shut down the factory in Coleraine and moved on the production to Merseyside, where they got massive grants there because of unemployment problems. So I got to meet the manager of the Spamboard place in Coleraine, went up to see him, and I was amazed that it was fantastic equipment. They had these things called hammer mills there, which we could use to process hemp.
Yeah.
And they also have mountains and mountains of wood waste there. There's quite a lot of wood waste goes into landfill. So we went to see Invest Northern Ireland. We said, look, we've got all the machinery here. We could produce wood fibre insulation.
Yeah.
Why would you want to do that? That was the response of Invest Northern Ireland. They're remotely interested. I got into terrible trouble for saying, I've said this publicly at more than one lecture in the past, so I don't mind putting it on your but I have got into trouble. Invest Northern Ireland won't talk to me anyway, so but they just were so short-sighted. They couldn't see that here was a potential raw material that was available in Northern Ireland, could be used to produce an ecological material, and they weren't interested in supporting its development. And that I presume all that machinery has gone to scrap now, and I don't know I haven't been up to look at the site recently.
Yeah.
I think it's all just sitting there derelict, which
That's,
is a huge waste. Rid
yeah,
of all the jobs that were lost as well.
yeah. And the inefficiency of that is that what now that we're coming to the point when the people like us are having conversations like these, and we're starting to realize that actually we need that. We're going to have to start again from scratch with have another full, basically carbon footprint of building a new factory with new steel and new, like, whereas we could have, if that was functional and under maintenance this whole time, there wouldn't, as you say, wouldn't have been so much waste. Yeah. But even the fact that there's wood waste going to a landfill is something that I find shocking, because that is just like, so many people have wood burning stoves in their homes. Surely there's a market there for wood. And like, if we were to use wood waste in those, for those products, rather than they have to be the uniform tie cut logs that you buy when you go to the supermarket.
Yeah. No, I think it's the people are very sort of stuck in I think one of the funniest things that I've ever come across was when we were building our house in Crossgar, we put down all this deck boarding outside, and this guy came to visit who was really admiring the boarding, and he said, "It's really good. What's it made out of?" We said, "It was wood." He said, "Oh, it looks so great. It could almost be plastic. As though having plastic would be so much better."
Yeah, that is,
and I think people are that's got so into people's mentalities now, and we've got to somehow shift that culture away from.
Well, I'm of a generation where everyone that I know my age knows all the words of Barbie Girl, and literally it's like life in plastic, it's fantastic, and we have really carried that through. Well, not me personally, but definitely a generational thing. And so if I was to say I'd love to build my own house tomorrow, how could I incorporate these natural techniques into a new building?
Well, it's very simple now. I mean, we're designing and building hempcrete buildings throughout the UK. And there are quite a few small businesses set up now. So, and I have contact with them. So there's a company in North Wales called Hempcrete Cymru, and they're building lots of things. And I'm working with some engineers in South Wales. They're building Hempcrete House in Maesteg at the moment. They're going to do some in Leeds. Got a councillor in Carmarthenshire wants to build all the social housing in Carmarthenshire out of Hempcrete. I think
that's ambitious,
unrealistic.
Oh, okay.
And then I got a call just the other day from a private builder developer in Derbyshire looking for advice. I don't even advertise myself as providing a free advice service, but people somehow track me down.
Yeah, they hear about it.
They get in touch, and so we're kind of moving on to the next stage where hopefully you can get these things more into mainstream construction. Yeah. There's still a lot of resistance. I mean, I deal with a lot of inquiries from the Irish Republic with people who want to build with hempcrete, but they can't find an architect who's willing to design it.
Right.
So the next step is through the Irish Hemp Cooperative is doing training.
Yes.
And trying to train architects and other people.
Yeah.
But when we advertise training courses, because we've run 3 recently in Northern Ireland, funded by the Cooperative Foundation, and because it was grant funded, we didn't charge people to come, which is actually a mistake. We should have got people to pay for it, because none of the architects actually bothered to turn up on the days of the training workshops. With 2 notable exceptions, I have to say. We had 2 architects go. But we got lots of self-builders and environmental people, really enthusiastic.
Yeah.
But it's getting it across to mainstream professionals is the big task that we've got next, and getting certification and approvals and. But I have to say, building control in Northern Ireland are hugely supportive and have always been very, very positive. They don't cause us any problems, but we have run into problems like that elsewhere.
And for anyone who is interested to find out more about this topic and hempcrete in general and your work, how could they reach out to you?
Well, the best thing would be I've got a new book coming out in a few weeks' time called Natural Building Techniques. So that tells you how to build out of natural materials. And it isn't just about hempcrete. It's got straw bale buildings or lots of amazing straw bale building projects in England. And it's got lots of other information about materials. So that's published by Crone Press, and it's only going to be £20. We decided to try and make it as affordable as possible. So it's the best source. The other thing would be to join the Hemp Cooperative Ireland, which has 4 regions now. So it's got an Ulster region thing, which we're hoping to develop. And they organise events and training workshops.
Amazing. And just one last question, just because I'm curious. Have you ever built a house with a thatch roof? Is that a natural building technique, or is it any good?
Yeah. The problem with thatch is that you then have a huge insurance premium in your house.
Okay.
So thatching's wonderful. I mean, it's a lovely material, and it's still possible to do it. Though getting good quality reeds to do thatching or straw is quite difficult to get the right kind of material. There's so much nitrogen fertilizers put on the land now, and that means that it gets into all the waterways, and the reeds therefore aren't as strong as they should be. And so on. So it's not, most of the thatching work that's done now is repairing historic buildings rather than using it as a new material. In fact, it was quite a funny thing happened a few years ago. The Building Research Establishment wrote a really good report about the potential for using natural bio-based materials. It wasn't considered on hemp, but it was a good report. And they also happened to mention thatch, but only saying it wasn't really a realistic material to use. And the National House Building Council, who commissioned the report, put out a press release saying that natural materials were not a good thing to use in modern buildings, just because of this little reference to thatch, and that got picked up by the
mainstream. That's ridiculous.
It was really, I got in touch with the director of the BRE at the time, and they had a mammoth row with the NHBC about this because it was just such a distortion. But we were always running up against that sort of opposition, unfortunately. It's not easy to convince people to change their ways.
Yeah, definitely. And especially when it's such an effective disruption, when it does have so many other benefits, it's probably hard for people to admit that what they're doing is not ideal. Well, Tom, thank you so much. That's amazing.
Good.
Brilliant. Thank you.